All right, you found why we are Christians, and my name is Kent Philpott. I'm sitting here in Mill Valley, California, but Laura Perry is in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hello, Laura,
Hi,
and welcome to the program.
thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh yeah, we're looking forward to this. And I'm gonna do something right now. I'm gonna hold up your book. I got to
Okay.
know Laura through her book called Transgender to Transformed. Love the book. You can get it on Amazon.com, and we'll talk about her book later on. But this is how I got to know Laura. And Laura, let's begin with uh, tell us about your family, where you grew up, and sort of those basic details of family and so on.
Okay. I grew up in a Christian home, and we were one of those, in church every time the door was open and involved in all the programs and looked like the perfect family. But, things weren't always so easy at home. And I think as a child, we all think that everybody else's family is perfect. Ours is the only one that has problems. And, we never talked about any of it. And so I thought that there was something really wrong with me. I didn't feel very loved by my mother. And I look back, and I think a lot of it was misperception. She was always doing a lot for me, but she never really wanted to spend time with me. And my dad would always spend a lot of time with me, and he'd play games with me and do those kind of things. And but because mom never really wanted me around, and she would tell me things like, go away, just get off me, leave me alone, go to your room, and that's how I was treated a lot. And so I just felt like mom didn't love me at all.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I did. Yeah, I had a one brother and one sister, and I had my sister was 8 years older, and my brother was 6 years older, so there was quite a gap.
In high school, and how was your high school years?
High school was really rough. When I was 14, I was really getting angry with God. I had wanted to be a boy for so long, and I had wasn't getting along well with my mother. I was really beginning to reject my female identity. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and so I was having constant pain and just all kinds of problems from this. My mom was running me to doctor after doctor trying to fix this, and it was just an awful experience. I was just in chronic pain every single day. And so I was beginning to get angry with God because I thought, okay, if God made me a girl and I have this female system that I don't want in the first place and it's causing me nothing but pain, then I was just angry with God. I felt cursed as being a female. And so by the time I got in high school, I didn't know what to do about these feelings of not wanting to be a girl. Back then nobody talked about being transgender. So I began to sort of try to solve all this pain by a lot of partying and sleeping around, and became very, very promiscuous. And I was trying so hard to find love, and the love I'd received as a little child, I think had gotten warped into sexual desire. I was molested when I was 8.
Yeah.
And so I think love and sex had become confused very, very early on. It wasn't by a family member, it was by a neighbor. But still, it created a lot of confusion. So by high school, I was just sleeping around with anybody that would pay attention to me.
Yeah, okay. So your high school years were a little rough. I'm wondering, Laura, if at this point, I know you were going to church on a regular basis and so on. Would you have described yourself as actually a born-again Christian at that point?
No, I wouldn't. I know that I had gone through the motions. I was had made a profession when I was 8. I was baptized, but I remember clearly the reason I wanted to get baptized was because my best friend at the time, there was a boy that I had called my boyfriend for many, many years, and we called each other boyfriend and girlfriend, and he was getting baptized, so I wanted to get baptized too. I had no concept of it. And the only time I remember ever really pursuing the Lord, I know that when I was at youth camp one year, the Lord called me to be a missionary. I was 13, But I don't think I ever really knew the Lord. I know that I was not born again. In fact, I remember hearing the scripture, 2 Corinthians 5:17, where it says, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. And I remember in high school thinking, I'm not a new creation. I think I just knew that intuitively.
I've been pastor for a long time, and I've seen similar things when kids, we just assume that they really have an experience with Christ, and they're not. And we used to call that being Christianized.
Yeah.
Being Christianized, and it's sort of disappointing. But anyway, so it sounds like that maybe happened to you a bit. So
in fact, it was kind of forced on me, because I was told very early on that I was a Christian. And it was like I didn't have any choice, and you are a Christian, and you are going to follow the Bible, and you are going to obey.
About how old were you, Laura, when you began to wonder about whether you were a boy or a girl? About how old did that begin with you?
It started when I was 5, were the earliest memories. And it started very simple. A lot of it, the rejection of my mom, and that got worse over time. But she treated my brother very differently. And I think there was a couple of reasons for that. One, they just got along much better in personality. He was very quiet and very obedient. And I found out that my mom had miscarried 2 boys between my brother and I. And so I think part of that was she was really grieving the loss of these boys. And so she was very attached to my brother. And she would always talk about, how boys love their mamas, girls are close to their daddies, but boys love their mamas. I heard that over and over and over as a child. And I just felt like, even though I was very loved by my dad, I just felt like mom didn't want me.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, Laura, like it wasn't a biological experience that you had. That was an emotional, psychological kind of thing that, of course, would have been beyond understanding of a little kid,
right?
5 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old, and I can see reading your book and hearing your story again in person, how that would have impacted you and made you want to be a boy.
Yeah. And I really didn't understand it. By the time I transitioned, I did not see any connection like this to childhood. I was like everybody else. I would have told you I was born that way. I'd always felt that way, and that's just who I was. And I think by the time you begin to embrace that, you buy into the delusion, and you can't see those things anymore. So at the time, I would not have told you, or did not even know of any reason that I felt that way.
Yeah. How did other kids, when you were in high school, how did they react to you?
Well, nobody knew in high school, because I think back then transgender was still never heard of.
Right.
So this was in the 90s, and I was just very promiscuous, and I was beginning to just be known to have a pretty bad reputation, and so I had lost a lot of my friends, and I don't know, I was kind of lost looking back. I was just partying all the time and becoming more and more withdrawn, more and more into very dark things. I remember I was so angry with God. When I was 16, I told God I would never serve him again, and really walked away. And I wanted the opposite of Christianity. And so it's really a miracle I didn't end up in a satanic cult.
Yes, I was just wondering about you heading in that direction, and I think that is the experience of many people.
Yeah.
They want to get as far away from it as they can.
Yeah.
Christianity. Yeah.
I think the only reason I didn't end up in a cult or something like that is because there wasn't Google. I couldn't just look up like where the nearest cult was, and I didn't know anybody that was into that.
Yeah. And you're in Oklahoma. Might have been a very different thing if you this had been happening in Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco. It could have taken a very a different turn. What happened after that, after high school?
Well, my senior year, I had spun so out of control. My parents, actually, my junior year, my parents had sent me to live with my uncle in Alaska, who was a missionary. They were hoping I would remember my dedication to the Lord to be a missionary. And then when that still wasn't fixing me, they sent me to a group home in Montana. And so I actually finished high school in Montana as being homeschooled. And
Okay, back up a second,
yeah,
Laura. Now, you went to Alaska
yeah,
to be with an uncle,
yeah.
and what was that experience like?
It was really kind of crazy in some ways. I mean, it was an amazing experience, but it was really, really far north. We were 30 miles above the Arctic Circle,
Wow.
and very different culture. But it was wonderful in a lot of ways, but only as far as it didn't bring me any closer to the Lord. I was so angry and so rebellious, and I immediately, on my first day at school, I immediately was made friends with some of the worst kids in school, as far as like the partiers and the drug addicts, um, and so I spent my entire time there partying and lying to my uncle, um, and there were some real demonic spirits there. I think looking back in high school, even living with my mom and dad, I know that I had some demonic spirits. I remember times I would feel like this hood would come over me, like something was controlling me, and I would just go into these rages, screaming at my mom at the top of my lungs, and I'd wake up the next morning like nothing had happened. So when I was living with my uncle, he had seen some demonic spirit, or at least a demonic spirit in the house. And he even saw one time when I'd gotten out of the shower, he saw this demon that I had drawn in my notebook. He saw this same figure drawn in the steam of the mirror, and I don't remember doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very interesting. There's two areas that I'm investing myself in ministry-wise here. One is in the area of transgendering, and the other one is in the area of deliverance ministry,
yeah.
casting out of demons, which is a very big thing, and we're doing that. I'm doing one by Zoom tomorrow, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Deliverance ministry by Zoom, and most people, when they hear you talk about what you just said, they'll think, "Oh, this Laura Perry, she's a nut." And much to our surprise, their surprise, this is all very real.
Very.
It's very real. So you're up there in Alaska, but somehow you ended up down in Montana. How'd that happen?
Well, my parents sent me to a group home instead of letting me come home. I thought I was going home. I was very angry because they had kind of tricked me and left me there. And I felt so abandoned. And I knew it was my own behavior that had landed me there, but I was still really angry about it. And I felt lied to and abandoned, even though looking back, I was lying to my parents so much, but somehow I'm really incredulous that they've lied to me, but I know that they were doing everything they could to try and save me. And but I didn't want to be saved. I was still so angry. And for several months, I really fought it. And I was determined not to be a Christian. And I was just getting darker and darker, trying to push away Christianity. And eventually they called the elders of the church and had my room anointed and prayed and everything for this demon to be cast out. And at some point, the demon seemed to have left, and I don't even remember it. I wish that was a more dramatic story. I really don't know what happened. And I think because I felt this deliverance, I thought, I'm a Christian, and I think I said some kind of prayer, but I really never had a repentant heart. It was like I was tired of fighting everybody at the group home. I was tired of trying to resist because I was living with 15 other Christians, and trying to live as a Satanist, it became very difficult. And so I sort of had this change of attitude, like, okay, I'm going to be a Christian now. I'm going to go along with everybody else. But I just still didn't really understand the gospel. And I don't think that I had any kind of repentant heart. I don't remember ever being transformed. And I might not have ever known that if I hadn't been so radically transformed later in life. But looking back, I still didn't know the Lord. But I drifted through that program for about a year. And when I graduated, I went on to YWAM, which is an international youth organization for missions. And I thought, yes, finally, I'm going to be the missionary that God called me to be. And I remember feeling, because everybody told me I had such an amazing testimony, I remember feeling like God's special chosen vessel. Like, I had so much pride, and I just thought I was like God's gift to the world. Like I'm gonna be the best missionary ever. And um, I didn't do so well at YWAM, and I think God finally had enough of me and my attitude. When I was in Thailand, I was complaining all the time, and I had a grand mal seizure, and he sent me home. So that's how I ended up back in my hometown of Bartlesville, Oklahoma, living with mom and dad. And,
Are you still having the sense that you should have been a boy?
uh, at this point, it was really on the back burner.
On the back burner?
I didn't love being a girl, but again, there was nothing I could do about it at the time. I'd never even heard of transgender. I had these feelings, but I had kind of put that, I was just searching for happiness. I was trying so hard to fix my life, and nothing seemed to be working. And I was becoming disillusioned because I felt like, well, I had tried the Christian thing, and it was like God had let me down. I didn't see how my own attitude had caused that. And so I was just angry and bitter by this time. It got worse when I got into college because I was unhealthy again. I'd had health problems all my life, but I was really gaining a lot of weight, and I was not well liked by the guys, and I was so desperate to be loved. I was in a new city now, in Tulsa, and I was very lonely, and I had made a couple of friends, but I was going to community college, and so there weren't people living on campus like there would be at a four-year university. And I was just getting lonelier and lonelier, and I kept trying to find men to pay attention to me, but nobody was. I remember even thinking, I didn't realize this at the time. By the time I did become transgender, I had forgotten this, but I remember being really jealous of the guys because it seemed like it was easier for guys that were overweight to get dates than it was for a girl. It was very difficult being an overweight female.
Yes, okay. So so here you are in college. What were you studying? What were you hoping to accomplish at school?
I was studying computers. I originally was getting into web design, and I really got more and more into the programming side of things. And that really, my classes were almost all male. I was usually the only female in the class. And so I really began to identify more with the guys.
Okay. So it's sort of a growing awareness, and you're in your early 20s at this point, Laura?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're still with your parents at home?
No. I had moved to Tulsa by that point. I moved to Tulsa when I started community college.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so take us a little bit farther along here. You're at school there in Tulsa, and what's going on with Laura there?
Well, I was getting more and more depressed, more and more lonely, and I started getting really deep into pornography. I'd been exposed to pornography years earlier, but it really began to spiral out of control in college. I was away from any sort of parental authority now, and so I didn't have to hide what I was doing on the computer. And eventually the pornography was not enough, and I joined an adult hookup site, basically, and began meeting men all over the state. I was trying so hard to be loved, and I was, telling these men that there were no strings attached, but I was always hoping that one of them would fall in love with me, and now that I understand men and women a little better, I realize that was not likely ever going to happen. But there was one guy actually that he was interested in me and wanted me to come back. And we ended up dating for 4 years, and this was the most awful relationship I've ever had in my life. He was a severe alcoholic, and I couldn't stand him most of the time, but I didn't want to be alone. And I liked having a boyfriend, even if he was, awful, because I didn't want to be alone. I was so depressed.
Yeah.
And it was really toward the end of that relationship where I'd been sleeping around behind his back even during the whole time. I really was not in love with him at all. And I remember at one point I thought, the reason that I'm never happy, the reason that I'm never getting any sort of satisfaction, the reason that I'm never being loved by these men is because I was supposed to be the man. And I was like, all those things began flooding back, all those feelings. And I thought, I felt like a boy my whole life. And I wasn't supposed to be a girl. Maybe something happened in the womb, maybe something genetic I don't know about, but I was supposed to be a man. And I still didn't know what to do about it. All I had ever heard of was cross-dressers, and that mainly men that were dressing as women. And so I looked up in Google, girl becoming a boy, just to see if anybody felt like I did. And I was amazed when all these results began to pop up. And I thought, wow, there's others that feel like I do. And that's when I went to a support group meeting in Tulsa. And I was 25 at the time. And I was still in college. I was very nervous. And I said, they asked me to tell a little bit about myself. And I don't remember what I said, but within 5 minutes, they're like, oh, you are definitely transgender. They don't even know me. But these people that are all transgender, nobody had any kind of medical or psychological degree. And they diagnosed me. And I was really worried, though, that I was never going to look like a man. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. After a year or so of taking hormones, no one's ever going to know you are a girl. And that's what I'd wanted to hear all my life. And that was like the big hook. And it was like, yes, this is who I am. And I just completely bought into it. And there was no looking back for me. And at that point, no one was going to tell me otherwise.
Right. And your parents didn't know anything about this?
Yeah, not yet. Not for about another 7 or 8 months.
About 7 or 8 months, finally you came out with it.
Yeah, after a while it began to get harder and harder to hide. I was beginning to look more and more masculine. I was wearing chest binders. I was dressing in men's clothes. I had cut my hair really, really short. And I remember my mom asked me, I didn't even realize, it was so self-centered at the time. I'd become extremely narcissistic, which is actually really common with transgenders. A lot of people don't understand. And I think there's the biggest reason for that, it's really the worship of self. And people become obsessed with this identity. And people I know that live as transgender, often it becomes all about that identity, and everything revolves around trying to make it real. And it never is. And you're constantly reminded that it's not real. And so everything becomes, well, how can I make this real? What else can I do? What else can I get or whatever that will make this more real? And so I didn't even realize the night that I came out that it was my parents' anniversary. It was their 40th wedding anniversary. And my mom asked me if I was trying to look like a man. And I hadn't intended to tell them, but tears started streaming down my face. And I hated that. I didn't want to be emotional. And it was like that reminding me that I really was a girl, because I just had this extreme, I mean, men can be emotional too, but at that moment, I was like, I didn't want to cry. I wanted to be so hard and tough, but so I inadvertently came out to my parents, and they were devastated.
I imagine they were. Were you taking hormones at this time?
Yep. I don't remember exactly when I started it, because when I first came out, I couldn't get into the doctor. There was only one doctor in Tulsa that would see transgender patients. So it took 3 or 4 months, I think, to get into the doctor. But I'd been on hormones for a few months. You had been. And
yeah. What changes did you start to notice, Laura?
My voice was getting a little bit lower. I think it still took a couple of months after that. I can't remember the exact timeline on that, but I know that my voice lowering was the first thing. And then over time, my face began to masculinize a little bit more. My jawline was getting harder. My body shape was changing. I lost a lot of my figure, I guess you could say. I became more straight, and eventually began to grow a little bit of facial hair. But that really took several years to grow in. But the voice change was probably the most immediate effect.
Were you dressing as a male at that point?
Yeah, I was dressing as male full time. I had come out to my friends at college, the few friends I had, and I was working at a temporary job, and I had told them that I was living as male, and they had known me for years, but they allowed me to work there as male, and I was using the men's restrooms, and so I really bought into this identity.
Okay. So you received quite a bit of acceptance in this
Yeah.
In this transition stage.
Yeah.
Okay. And were you involved with men, women? What was your sex life like that? And
I at the time I really wanted to date girls. I had always been attracted to men, but I just wanted to be a normal man. Looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I was really jealous of my brother, and so I told people at the time that I didn't really care who I dated. I cared about my gender far more than I cared about who I dated. But I was dating girls. I wanted a girlfriend, but I actually ended up with a man that was living as a woman, and so we were both transgender.
wow, this is getting complicated, Laura.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, okay, would you say that again? We've got about 1 minute.
Yeah.
You started dating a male
Hmm.
who was wanting to be a female.
Yes. Yeah. So we were both transitioning oppositely. So
Okay.
he was living as a woman and I was living as a man.
Wow, that sounds very complicated, Laura.
Yes, it was.
Was that a good experience for you, or?
It was. We actually had a very good relationship. Out of all my relationships I've ever had, he treated me so well. Of course, I called him a woman at the time and referred to him as my wife eventually. We had a good relationship. Maybe we bonded, I think, over the mutual experience. And the Lord used him in a lot of ways, really.
Really?
You know, even though, I know this wasn't the Lord's will, this was not a God-honoring relationship, he's really the one that pushed me to keep in contact with my parents. He'd lost his parents at a very young age, different times, but he lost his mom when he was 7. And he was also the one that sort of got me on the path of seeking the truth, because he was one of only 3 I've ever met in the lifestyle that were conservative, and he was like radically conservative.
Wow.
And so it got me to think for the first time in my life, not about just going with what everybody else was saying or doing, but really thinking about what I believed.
Wow. Well, Laura, thank you for all of this. We're coming to the end of our first program, but we're going to come back with another program talking with Laura, and there's a whole lot that's coming up. Thank you, Laura. We're going to have a little pause, and we'll come right back on our Zoom and record the second one. All right.